Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is with great pleasure that I take the floor to present you the World Public Sector Report 2019, a publication of the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. I would like to thank the Academy and the School of Management at Fudan University for inviting the United Nations Secretariat to present this report today. Since 2001, the World Public Sector Report has sought to share trends, good practices, and lessons learned in public administration. There have been 7 editions of the report before this one. They have covered issues of global relevance in the field of public administration, globalization and the role of the state, e-government, human resources in public administration, participation and citizen engagement, rebuilding public administration post-conflict, accountable and inclusive institutions, and institutional aspects of policy integration. The 2019 edition of the report was an effort to assess progress on institutional dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals, as spelled out in Goal 16. Specifically, the report looked at transparency and access to information, accountability, anti-corruption, participation, and non-discrimination. The report examines global trends in these areas and also takes stock of what we know about the effectiveness, outcomes, and impacts of initiatives that seek to address them. This is illustrated with examples from different SDG areas, including a dedicated chapter on institutions for gender equality. While the report was published last year, a Chinese translation is now available to all. It was prepared by the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. This is the 2nd edition of the report that the Academy has translated. I would like to express heartfelt thanks to the Academy for making the report available to Chinese readers, thereby increasing its reach to hundreds of national practitioners in public administration. In the next few minutes, I would like to give you practical information about the report, briefly describe its structure and content, and give you a flavor of its key findings and messages. The report comprises 5 chapters. The first chapter is a review of trends in institutional development in the areas of access to information, transparency, accountability, participation, and non-discrimination. National institutions evolve in response to societal change, sometimes very quickly. In particular, information technologies are changing the space in which policies and institutions develop. I would like to illustrate some of the trends covered in the report. Starting with transparency. In 2017, 118 countries had adopted a law or policy on the right to information. In addition, 90 countries had the right to information explicitly mentioned in their national constitutions. As of 2018, 139 countries had implemented open government data initiatives that make data available to the public through central portals, as compared with only 46 in 2014. Most governments now offer information and transactional services online, including e-procurement tools, with a rapid progression in the diffusion of such tools during the past few years. On participation, the past few decades have witnessed the development of participatory mechanisms. For example, the trends show an increase in the number of countries that use e-consultation over time, and also indicate that governments often acknowledge how e-consultations have informed decision-making. On accountability, the effectiveness of the oversight exercised by parliaments and supreme audit institutions varies across countries. Among key challenges to effective parliamentary oversight are lack of resources and staff to conduct independent analysis, and information gaps between governments and parliaments. With respect to supreme audit institutions, the lack of independence remains a concern in many countries, as do capacity issues. Going now to accountability in the public service. Public service reforms undertaken in the past decades have emphasized the use of mechanisms inspired from the private sector, such as performance frameworks, performance-based pay, to enhance performance and accountability. Yet, the report notes that we know surprisingly little in terms of the impacts of such mechanisms on the performance and effectiveness of public institutions, especially in a cross-country context. And this is certainly an area that would benefit from more research. Lastly, in terms of non-discrimination, there has been progress in developing international norms mirrored by development in national legislation. However, the available data makes it clear that discrimination is still prevalent and remains a formidable challenge. The review done for the report reveals that in many areas, our knowledge of the effectiveness of institutional arrangement is still limited, that outcomes and impacts vary widely across countries, and that they depend on the broader institutional context, including the whole accountability system in a country, which includes the government, parliament, supreme audit institutions, anti-corruption agencies, many other state agencies, as well as many non-state actors. The second chapter looks in detail at anti-corruption in the context of the SDGs. There is wide mobilization to fight corruption, with many countries having adopted laws and strategies and having set up anti-corruption institutions over the past 10 years. Yet, little is known about the effectiveness of those reforms. This is starting to change, as some organizations and networks are looking into this quite closely. For example, the Open Government Partnership and the Global Initiative on Fiscal Transparency, GIFT. The report shows the importance that international anti-corruption instruments have had for the evolution of national landscapes in terms of legislation and institutional arrangements to fight corruption. It underlines the challenges of coordination that can arise among national agencies with anti-corruption mandates. It also illustrates how success in anti-corruption depends not on a single new institution, but on a layer of laws, regulations, and institutions, all supporting the fight against corruption. This includes, for example, declaration of assets for public officials, regulation of lobbying, ethics charters for the civil service, and many other preventive and repressive instruments. Finally, and as importantly, the report shows how anti-corruption efforts are linked with risk and vulnerability analysis, including at the sector level, a link that is relevant to all practitioners working on the SDGs. The third chapter of the report looks at the national budget process as a key link between goals, strategies, and programs on the one hand, and outcomes on the other hand. The report finds that efforts to align national budgets with the Sustainable Development Goals have so far been limited, both in developed and developing countries, with a few outlier countries such as Mexico. Many countries have adopted limited approaches, from qualitative reporting on specific goals by the executive branch to more complete mapping and tracking of budgets against individual goals and targets. Based on current developments, the report concludes that the capacity of national government to track how public spending contributes to the SDGs will likely increase over time, but only slowly, and will remain highly variable across countries. The report shows how the institutional principles of SDG 16 are all relevant to the budget process, from transparency to anti-corruption to participation and non-discrimination. The fourth chapter looks at risk management in public administration. Processes to manage risk in public administration have evolved quite rapidly over the past decade, driven in particular by development in knowledge and practice in different fields and influenced by international and regional institutions through normative frameworks, analytical work, and technical assistance. While risk management at the national level is still primarily done on a sector level, recent trends point to a recognition of the importance of addressing risk in more holistic ways. Assessments of multiple risks have become common, and a growing number of countries have instituted national risk assessment processes. More countries now coordinate their risk management strategies and decision-making processes across various ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as across levels of government. Some countries also involve non-state actors, including civil society, experts on the private sector, in all or some parts of their national risk assessment and management processes. The chapter provides examples of national approaches to risk identification and management in various thematic areas. These examples illustrate the powerful contribution of recent information and communication technologies in this regard. The fifth chapter looks at public institutions for gender equality, both at the cross-sectoral and sectoral levels. It highlights the contribution of national mechanisms for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, as well as the challenges they face. It illustrates various tools that have been used to fight discrimination against women, both in law and in practice. It shows how efforts to enhance transparency and accountability in public administration can contribute to gender equality. And finally, the chapter illustrates the needs for gender-sensitive anti-corruption efforts. One particular tool that the report examines is gender-sensitive budgeting. In recent years, gender budgeting tools have developed rapidly, with wide variations across countries in the detail of how they are used. The report concludes that the application of similar budgeting tools to other groups of the population that face discrimination, for example, people with disability, is less developed. The report also examines how countries have used transparency requirements to enhance the accountability of employers for equal pay for equal work, an issue addressed under Target 8.5 of the SDGs, which is relevant to developed and developing countries alike, and has recently received much attention. Mandating companies in the private sector and in the public sector to collect and publish data on the gender pay gap enables governments, but also citizens and civil society to monitor trends in this area, which provides a powerful incentive for employers to address the issue, beyond compliance checks and sanctions. Several countries have adopted measures to address the gender pay gap over the past 5 years. It will be interesting to see how effective these new measures turn out to be. In conclusion, the report clearly shows the need for continuing analysis. When we move from the outputs and immediate outcomes of institutional initiatives, for example, how many laws were passed that aim to combat discrimination, how many requests were satisfied under a right to information law, or how many corruption cases were prosecuted in a given period, we find that we are often unable to answer simple but crucial questions. For example, is corruption in public administration less prevalent than it was 10 years ago? Have transparency initiatives led to greater accountability of governments for the delivery of public services? This suggests that all the communities working on SDG 16 still have much to do to better understand institutions and how they can effectively contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. The report also includes many references to recent publications on websites, which I hope can contribute to inform efforts by practitioners to improve public service delivery on the ground. I would like to conclude by again thanking the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences for translating the report. I really hope that the report will provide added value to future discussions on how institutions can support the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.